All right. And then we are going to move on to Brandon Aiyuk, talk a little bit about, how we project his 2021 year to go. This is a guy that I think is going to become a top 10 wide receiver in the league. If not this year, then next year. I am extremely high on Brandon Aiyuk. And it's funny because I was thinking about last offseason and going into last season, I thought Deebo Samuel was a better player. Then we see Brandon Aiyuk's amazing, amazing rookie year. You see that he pretty much wins in every type of dimension, every type of route. He's running slants, he's running corners, he's running post streaks, whatever it is, he is winning at a very, very high rate. This guy, he's always looked a little bit like Devontae Adams. He's probably a little bit stronger than Devontae, not quite as quick, but he has like that feel and he looks like that kind of player. Is he going to be Devontae Adams next year? No. Devontae Adams will probably be the best receiver in the league once again next season. But Brandon Aiyuk, the chance that Trey Lance to Brandon Aiyuk to become like that dynamic combo is very, very high. Now, we don't know if we're going to see that combo next year. I would guess that we're going to. But even if it's Jimmy Garoppolo, I think Brandon Aiyuk is going to have an amazing year. Last year, he played 12 games, 60 catches, 748 yards, and then he had, seven touchdowns. Aiden, what do you think his stat line is going to look like in 2021?
So I'm going to assume that he's going to miss a couple games here and there. He's not the biggest guy. We've seen Deebo get hurt. I think that we're going to see less running jet sweep plays this year, which will minimize some of those hits. But if I had to guess right now, missing a couple games, keep that in mind. But with the addition of an extra one for that 17-game season, I think we're looking at somewhere around 80 catches, 1,150 yards, and eight touchdowns. Some of that stuff will dip or go up depending on who's playing quarterback. I think if Jimmy's playing quarterback, you're going to get a little bit more catches, a little bit less yards. And if Lance plays quarterback, you're going to have a couple less catches, but maybe a couple more yards with a little bit more deep shots. But he's a guy who I expect to lead the 49ers in receiving this year. I'm not huge on Kittle in fantasy this year. For those of you that play fantasy, I think he's still the 49ers' best offensive player, but he's going to be used just as much as a decoy and just as much in the running game as he will be in the pass game. And I think Aiyuk is going to have a really, really good year. He's a guy who I think, like you mentioned, the ceiling is really unlimited. I think he could be Devontae Adams, which is interesting because Devontae Adams is probably going to be a free agent after this next year, which will be interesting to see how much he gets paid and how much you're going to have to equate for this Aiyuk price tag, because we've talked about this before. We don't know if Deebo is going to get that second contract, but he's a guy who I think is the 49ers wide receiver one for the next 10 years, hopefully. And after a really good rookie year, this is his coming out party with 1,000-yard season, and I think he's going to have an awesome year, and I'm excited to see him just absolutely dominate.
And if you guys didn't watch much of Brandon Aiyuk last year, because I know a lot of people didn't, and maybe this isn't only 49er fans listening, but also people just kind of interested in his fantasy outlook, he was really, really good. And he was winning pretty much routinely as a rookie in the NFL, like from the start. You saw him really take off towards the second half of the year where he was putting up double-digit fantasy points every week. And he was when Kittle was out, it was no question he was the premier target. I still think he's going to be the premier target even with Kittle coming back. And that's not to knock Kittle or say anything bad about Kittle. We love George Kittle. But Kyle Shanahan is going to try to get the ball in his hands a little bit more. I would guess that my guess is that Aiyuk comes down with 90 catches this year. And that would be 33% more than last season. But like we said, he only played 12 games last year. So you add 3 more games, you add an offense that's going to try to throw him the ball a lot more. You add another year of experience. I'm fully expecting him to come out and be a better player. He wasn't that great in, like the run game. He wasn't that great of a blocker on the outside. He's going to improve in that. And maybe not by some giant margin or anything, but he will be a better player in that aspect. I would expect that. He's talked about, they basically said he's come out and he's looked a lot better than he did in his rookie year. And that's to be expected from most NFL players, especially wide receivers, where you kind of have to come and adjust, figure it out. And you see how many receivers that, as rookies don't really put up any type of good numbers, and then in their second year they really come out. Brandon Aiyuk was doing that last year. He's a guy that you want to get into open space. We've seen and like I said, we've seen the Lance to Aiyuk deep balls. It seems like every single day you see one or two where Aiyuk has 10 yards on a receiver and Lance just bombs a ball down to him. I think you're going to see that with Jimmy Garoppolo too. And if they don't, if it's stuff around the line of scrimmage, you're going to see a lot of RPOs, I think, with him this year as well. A lot of bubbles, a lot of screens. I don't think you're going to see as much of him running the football. And that's more when Trey Lance is at quarterback. If Jimmy Garoppolo is at quarterback, I still think they'll do end rounds and stuff. They've proven to be very effective in the past, but they're probably going to do that more with Deebo Samuel. But Brandon Aiyuk, for fantasy, he is the guy to own. And if you're a 49er fan, he's probably the second jersey you'd want to buy right now, the second most exciting player on the offensive side of the ball, that is. So very, very exciting stuff for him early on in his career. If you guys have ever checked out like his route tree, it's just green. It's purely green. I think that, and one thing I don't know if I've said on the show, but I think there's a very good chance that this 2020 wide receiver class features 3 of the top 5 wide receivers in the NFL. Not next year, but in a couple years down the road when, the Julio Jones, Michael Thomas, Devontae Adams, Stephon Diggs, those guys get a little bit older. I think there's a chance that you see Justin Jefferson, Brandon Aiyuk, and CeeDee Lamb all like widely viewed as top 5 receivers in the league, both in fantasy and just in terms of how good of players they are. So I am all in on the rising stock of Brandon Aiyuk. But Aiden, anything else you want to add?
For me, it boils down to he had 60 for 750 and 5 last year with Nick Mullins throwing him the ball. That's going to get better. You got an extra game. I think that anything under 1,000 yards would be surprising. Depends if he misses half the season, obviously. But I think anything under 1,000 yards, I'd be surprised. And I think you hit it right on the head. This is the fantasy guy to own. And he's not being drafted all that high. I think people look at Kittle and look at what he's done over the past couple of years, and they're not factoring in after not watching those 49ers games last year where Aiyuk was constantly open and Mullins couldn't get him the ball or took a sack or fumbled, or I don't even want to think about Nick Mullins anymore. He's not on the roster. But super excited to see what Aiyuk is going to do, and I think he's going to be awesome.
So what's your final stat line projection for Brandon Aiyuk?
I'm going to say 80 for 1,108.
Okay, pretty close to me.
Mm-hmm.
I think I would go 90 for 1,200 and also 8. I think the touchdown 7, 8. Like I think that's going to be pretty consistent. You're going to see them run the ball a lot in the red zone. So most time he's going to score, it's not going to be red zone plays. It'll be plays where he takes it to the house. But I think 80 to 90 catches, or even 80 to 100 catches should be expected. And I think that's why he's, like you said, like he's not really getting drafted that high in fantasy. I think that's exactly why, is because people expect him to have, he had 60 catches last year. Maybe he'll have 70. Maybe he'll go down because Kittle's back. No. He is going to be the featured guy in this passing attack. And I fully expect that. And, I think there's a chance it actually helps Kittle a little bit too, because you're going to see a lot of home run plays from Kittle. And we've seen that's how he has his big games where it's like, oh, look, Kittle had 200 yards and 2 touchdowns today. Oh, why? Well, because he was running and there was literally nobody in the secondary because, everyone went on to some other guy or bit on the run or whatever the case is. But Brandon Aiyuk, he's going to be one of the best receivers in the league. I really believe that. And like I said, this is a guy I thought Deebo Samuel was a better player than coming into last year. And his rookie year, it shocked me. Like the way that he can win, his vertical, his horizontal movements, his start-stop movements, it's ridiculous. Also a very strong player, upper body. He finds ways to get separation that way, but he's a guy that just creates space easily and routinely in the NFL, it's just going to keep getting better, I think. So 90 catches, 1,200 yards, 8 touchdowns is my guess. And when it happens, you guys can come back and be like, hey, these guys were spot on about Brandon Aiyuk. So that's going to do it for today's episode, though. So thanks for listening, and come back for Daily's 49ers content every day.